So that's why my talk is about gender and the genocide. And because many times we think about the loss, we don't focus on those who survived, who are mostly women, mothers, widows.
The Burundi 1972 Genocide Commemoration Conference in Toronto, Canada.
Our next presenter that I'm honored to present is Dr. Jeanine Ntihirageza. Jeanine is a professor and founding director of the Center for Genocide and Human Rights Research in Africa and Diaspora at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago, United States. As survivor of the 1972 Burundi genocide, she has dedicated her career to document the silent atrocities and promote healing through Africa-centered approaches to justice, reconciliation, and prevention. Her research explores the intersection of language, memory, and trauma with expertise in Ubuntu philosophy and post-conflict healing. Her current invited book manuscripts, Anatomy of a Silent Genocide, Burundi 1972, draws on 200 survivor testimonies and is the first comprehensive analysis of this systematically erased genocide. As a genocide survivor whose father was also killed during the genocide, Dr. Jeanine has seen a lot and has a lot to share with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeanine.
Thank you so much. Your Excellency, Chargé d'Affaires of the Embassy of the Republic of Burundi to Canada, Monsieur Evariste Ngendakengera, distinguished organizers of the conference, especially the president of the Communauté Burundaise du Canada, and esteemed guests, it is a profound privilege to stand before you today at a commemoration that is, for me, deeply personal. It is a profound privilege to stand before you today at this important moment that marks many families, many survivors. So this is special for you to be able to organize such an event. It's really, really special to so many of us. So in the name of those who survived and those who shared their stories, I stand here trying to share a little bit of what I have learned about this genocide that took our loved ones. So my gratitude first and foremost goes to the survivors who entrusted their stories to the researchers of the Center for Genocide and Human Rights Research in Africa and Diaspora. In short, I keep using GIRAD. When I say GIRAD, that's the center in Chicago at Northeastern Illinois University. And so their courage in speaking after decades of enforced silence is the foundation upon which this work stands. My gratitude goes, I'm also sincerely grateful to Mr. Jean-Claude, a remarkably calm and yet incisively thoughtful organizer, for his kind of invitation, and to all the members of the organizing committee whose dedication made this commemoration possible. So finally, to each of you present here today, whether in person or on Zoom, thank you for being here with us. Your witness to these voices matters. Thank you so much. Okay, so I will try to keep mixing a little bit of French and Kirundi, but most of my presentation will be in English. So I approach this research, the work I do, as both a scholar and a survivor of the 1972 genocide against Hutu in Burundi. We've been, as I'm director of the Center for Genocide and Human Rights Research in Africa and Diaspora in Chicago, right? So in that position, I also travel with colleagues professors and the students, we go to Burundi to collect testimonies of the 1972 genocide. But before I started, I remember talking to René Lemarchand, Professor René Lemarchand, who you heard earlier mentioned by Father Ernest. I told him that I had plans to go collect the stories, and he said, hurry up before it's too late. And the too late meant some people were older, so we may lose them before we collect the stories. So among the people I've been traveling with is Colette Rastchensky here, who was my student and now works for, directs the Center for the Digital Oral History Archive, where we put our stories. And then the other person who really encouraged me to collect these stories as another colleague in the profession is Patricia Daly. I told her I was planning to collect the stories, and she said, if you don't do it quickly, I'll do it myself. So I had to hit the road running to collect these stories. So this research really matters. Our 5 decades of enforced silence have obscured gendered dimensions of the genocide. So that's why my talk is about gender and the genocide. And because many times we think about the loss, we don't focus on those who survived, who are mostly women, mothers, widows, daughters, sisters. And so women survivors' testimonies remain largely absent from existing scholarship. In our task of collecting the stories, we also traveled across Burundi, all over north, south, east, west. We went everywhere. And so we really wanted, because many times you hear that some people want to deny it, that it never happened, right? Since nobody was saying anything, so it didn't happen. But it turns out that, as you heard, Father Ernest mentioned, for him, after years of looking and checking, maybe 250,000, but the range of those who killed, the lives we lost, are between 150,000 on the lower end and 300,000 on the higher end. So, those are the estimates of the numbers of those killed. Of course, there are those forced in exile, about 160,000. And then, of course, this only lasted about 3-4 months, but we lost so many people. 10% of the population. Think about that, right? We lost about 10% of the population in Burundi in 1972. And most of them were in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Just think about that. In their prime years of producing for the country. So the impact on the families, the communities, and nation was just devastating. But those perpetrators, the killers, didn't care because they had their own agenda. So on the day when you see on this image, I'm sorry that some of the images are really hard to look at. But I've been telling these stories for more than 10 years now. So I don't break down as much anymore. So I know that when I first looking at these images, it was impossible for me to keep looking. So, but on the day we collected these stories, we took this picture, this image you see here. On this day, these are all my colleagues, and Colette is one of them. And so on this day, we're standing, I'm right there, and we're standing in Eric, who was the head of the exhumation project, who worked in the TRC, the Commission de Vérité et Réconciliation. He was showing us, explaining the different places, the mass graves, the remains where they were stored. And so we arrived here in Muzenga in the south, because they gathered the remains regionally. So those in the south, they gathered them in Muzenga, in Bururi. And so it close to Buta, actually. And so he paused, he said, I don't know how to say this, but there is a high chance that Jeanine's father, brother, and other relatives may be here. And he points here in these bags, these bones. The last day I had seen my father, he was walking away, going to Bujumbura from Rumeza. Some of you may know Manyoni. Going to Bujumbura to collect the business material to replenish his stores. He walked away and never came back. And now I'm looking at bones. And I'm supposed to figure out which bone could be my father, which bone, which skull could be my brother. I'm looking at those. And so it was very hard that day. And they looked at me. They didn't know what to do with me, with themselves. It was a tough moment. But it was very important for me. So I'm privileged to have engaged on this healing journey, to have had a chance to tell my story. It's such a privilege. There are many people who haven't had that chance. So, and again, thank you so much to all of you who are here to hear us again, to listen to us. So, what you see, the images you see here again, is what we were able to see when we traveled across the country. But we were not just seeing the remains of the bodies, the human remains, but we saw this material, buttons of jackets and coats. We saw bracelets. We saw shoes, lots of shoes. I'll get back to the shoes in a minute. We saw ceinture, belts, you know. We saw so much. And guess what else we saw? Bullets. These are bullets. Yeah. So it was tough to see that that's what, yeah. All right. So the killed were overwhelmingly male Hutu. They were Hutu, primarily men. They were the brain winners and the household heads. And we all know in Burundi, especially in 1972, the head of the family. We all know what that means. If you visited someone's house, you said Kwanaka at so-and-so's house, and it was the man, the head of the family. When that's taken away, it's like removing a beautiful warm coat or blanket and leaving someone cold, in the cold. So they were educated, many of them, and they were maybe semi-educated, but they were rich, they had money, they had grown food, a lot of cotton, lots of coffee, and so palm trees, so much. So they were the community knowledge holders, and this is really important here. The ones who were able to grow food and become rich in it, it means they had skills. They knew how to do it. But in a minute, I'll talk about how property was taken. And those who took that property didn't know how to take care of it. They would have had it in the first place if they didn't know how to. So they are taking property they don't know how to take care of. The businesses, my father's stores, they didn't know how to build a store and keep it going. So within a short time, it was breaking down. It was a mess. So then they also took away, as you heard, youth and students. You know, the elite to be was taken away. And today you hear that people say, Burundi is the poorest country in the world. Well, guess what? If you just keep killing 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds every so often, what do you expect? The country could not. And of course, the perpetrators didn't think about that. And honestly, they didn't care, right? So who was left behind? The widows, suddenly the sole providers. Many of them, like my mom, was not growing food because we had 6 employees in the house. Where at my house, at home, we had 6. One to take care of cows, the one on the farm, the one to cook, and so on. And then now all of a sudden they had to learn how to grow food. Many of them lived on military camps, or we lived in Bujumbura in beautiful homes and having cars, and now they are forced to go up country and have to learn to relive, how to live with nothing, everything taken away. So you have the orphaned children left there. You have, in some cases, some mothers just left because they couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle raising orphans on their own with nothing. Daughters stripped of their fathers, families without economic foundation. Yeah, really painful. So we cannot focus, yes, we focus on the victims of the ones we loved, we lost, but there are those who were left. Let's give them space to mourn and talk about their loss and their struggles. So yes, the majority of those who we lost were men, because we can tell by their clothes, by their shoes, their belts, their jewelry, the watches, the dentures. You know, I'm yet to find women of that time who had dentures. It was mostly wealthy men who could afford dentures. And you see the dentures here, right? I'm showing you yeah. So you can tell, right? So, and do we know there were women who were killed? Oh, yes. Here you go. So that many of you, it may be the first time you hear that there were women who were killed in 1972. Look at these shoes. These are women's shoes, right? Oh, I'm so sorry, you can't see those in person. But yeah, so these were shoes that were from women. And some of us think, by looking at all the rosaries, there are rosaries here, we think there may have been nuns who were killed among the women who were killed. So those of you who are not able to see the slides earlier, I was showing you that we now know that even if we keep saying that those who were killed in 1972 were men, we have proof that there were women who were killed. And from what we're able to gather from other pieces of evidence, like the rosaries, crosses, we know that there were nuns and priests who were killed. So maybe that those women's shoes were from nuns, but we may never know for sure who they belonged to. But yes, there is an indication based on the type of clothes that we saw, based on the shoes that they wore and jewelry, we could tell that they were women who were killed in 1972. And on that slide, I also showed that it's not just the human remains that we were able to see when we traveled to Burundi. On a vu aussi des chaussures, nous avons vu des boutons de jaquette, et nous avons vu donc des bracelets et même des dentures, donc les dentiers, ok, et des dentiers. Donc ça nous avons, en tout cas, et même à côté, alors à droite, vous voyez des cartouches, oui, des cartouches. Donc on a utilisé des armes, oui. Bon, okay, so that's that on the slide. The next slide, please. Thank you. So, when people lost their loved ones, so in Kirundi, we know that, just a second, view, presenter. Okay, so in Kirundi, when we say someone is rich, especially in 1972, someone is rich, like has many things. Quand on dit qu'une personne est riche, généralement, c'est qu'il a beaucoup d'enfants et beaucoup de quoi? De vaches, voilà. Maintenant, si on tue les enfants, la richesse est partie. Donc, ça, il ne faut pas juste penser aux choses, mais il y a les vies, nous avons perdu des gens que nous aimions, mais aussi notre richesse, notre sécurité. We lost our security. And that's very important because even psychologically, you lost your sense of security when you lose your children. And as we know, the children were not, les enfants n'étaient pas juste pour la famille, donc le père et la mère. c'était les enfants de la société, de la communauté, du village. Donc, cette perte psychologiquement, ce sont des traumas que Colette va parler de ça bientôt. Il y a beaucoup de traumas que nous vivons avec et qui ne sont pas encore résolus. Donc, who was left behind to fend for themselves? So the widows, the mothers, the orphans. Donc les orphelins, les veuves, les mères, ils sont restés pour survivre avec eux-mêmes sans aide. Okay, I'll continue to kind of try to be fast. Okay.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So, of course, with that psychological trauma also came the economic devastation. And guess what? All these years, when we know, among ourselves, we know someone who's a killer. Father Ernest shared names of people who participated, who may have been on a genocide committee. I'm not saying I know for sure, but it sounds like it was a genocide committee. Otherwise, how in the world did they know to dig holes? Il y avait beaucoup de fossés dans many pits across the country, right? Then do you know what they told us? That they were pits to practice, that for the military, for practice, when the military, the soldiers want to practice, that's why they did it, right? So as the children coming from school, we used to play in those big pits, right? Before 1972. So those were dug before the genocide, because we used to play in them pretending to be in the military. So we'd run into them and run out and put grass, on our heads and run into the pits. Guess what? I had no idea that maybe one day my father's remains would be in that same pit. Il y avait beaucoup de fossés, de fosses communes qui ont été, de fosses qui étaient creusées avant avril 1972, ce qui montre que vraiment il y avait un plan. So we lost. So those who the survivors lost everything, right? The perpetrators confiscated the property of murdered Hutu men and faced no accountability to this day. So imagine more than 50 years later and not a single person, and we know them, but not a single person has been held accountable for the killings. Personne n'a jamais été puni. Vraiment, impunité totale. C'est vraiment dommage, même plus que dommage. So, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont pris? Ils ont pris the land and agricultural plots, the cows, goats, cattle, the tools, and ils ont pris même la balance, the scale, They came to my house, to my mom, and mind you, my mom is Tutsi, but they didn't care that she's their sister. They took everything, including a scale, the bikes, the clothes. A few days later, I would see one of the teachers in the local school, a neighbor, wearing my father's clothes. And I had been told that my father would, to protect me, that he had gone to Tanzania, and I had no idea because I was only 11. I didn't know that they told me he was alive, that he would come back. But he was just in Tanzania, so I thought, he does business, so must have gone to bring some merchandise. So they really stole everything they could steal, including clothes. So this teacher wore my father's clothes, incredible. And what else was taken? Savings, bank money from banks. In fact, I think in one of the reports from a Severe Truth and Reconciliation Commission points to, actually this is my cousin's husband, Karori Charles, went to, after he fled, he hid himself, he was protected. Some point, it's a long story. Then he comes back he was a teacher. He goes to the bank and he says, Gufata. He went to get his salary, and then they were surprised, like, why are you here? And the person who looked at him and said, "Are you alive?" He said, "Are you alive? Urachariho." And so then he said, "Of course." And they said they couldn't find his matricule, lo numero matricule. They had erased it. And so he had to go find it. He said, "This is me. I teach," and he showed where he teaches. So again, that's all to say they had planned to take everything and erase the trace. And the crazy thing about genocide is the people who kill, they plan how to hide it. So they take it and they kill and they plan to hide. Okay, so the consequences: immediate destitution, inability to feed the children, loss of protective capacity, no legal redress, nothing was in place for decades later to try to come to terms with this. Okay, next please. Thank you. So imagine they kill your loved ones, they take everything that could keep you alive, and then they tell you are an enemy of the nation. You heard some of the vocabulary that Father Ernest used. So they abamenja, abansi b'igihugu, and so on and so forth, right? So the Tutsi regime really orchestrated everything. And so let me bring up something else that's interesting. So imagine a country where roads, there were poor roads, right? Very bad roads, very few and bad roads. No phone, no cell phones, of course. No landlines in the villages, right? So how in the world did the country be on fire in a very short time? The killings started all over the country. How did they communicate the information so that everyone in every corner of Burundi started killing the Tutsi in those parts of Burundi started killing immediately after April 1929. So that's something else that tells you they knew and they had planned it. Just I wonder, ce qui me surprend vraiment, je m'étonne comment ils ont pu faire ça. The Hutu were the majority in the country, and yet the communication went through among the majority of the minority of the country, and there was no knowing, so they ran for their lives. Very strange. So the women were left as traitors, hated, and not having a way to help themselves. Next, please. Thank you. So again, they were denied the right to mourn. You heard Father Ernest share how, if you were trying to say anything, you were putting your life in danger. And then, guess what doesn't help us? Our culture. So we are used to respecting authority. The Mwami authority was transposed to a president who came in with a coup, who forced himself into the leadership of the country, Michel Michombero, right? Now he has the respect that the Mwami had. That's wrong. But how else could they do it, right? So you have people who still believed that there is a high authority that they have to listen to. But then the culture, all the prophets that we have, agapfuye, kabazwivu. So if you want to know the news of the people of the buried, you ask the dirt or in the grave, or right. So you go to the dirt to ask for the dead, or rekakuzura kabodze. Don't remember what's gone, what's buried. I hate to use the word, what's rotten, but that's not really, it sounds disrespectful, but that's how we say it. So there are a lot of proverbs that tell us to be quiet, to not talk about the laws, to respect authority, and so on. Okay, so the fear of death. Okay, next slide, please. All right, thank you. So the children left behind were denied education. As Father Ernest said, the children, imagine if you don't have means, you didn't have the uniform, they couldn't purchase the uniform. The mothers were left, right? They lost the breadwinners, so the children could not stay in school because they couldn't afford it, many of them. And honestly, others were terrified. I have a cousin who, brilliant, sharp guy. We all knew him as the intelligent one. And he couldn't continue to school because when he went back, he tried to go back, they traumatized him. Bullies got on him until he came back. He refused to go back to school. So financial consequences, financial collapse, of course, intergenerational poverty, persistent harassment, loss of knowledge networks. We lost, yes, those who had the knowledge, the educated, the businessmen, and so on. And then children, and especially girls, were pulled from school to help mothers sustain the family. My own sister, the second in the family, did not continue to school. She's married with 8 children. Then there are, of course, psychological barriers, trauma, grief, and stigmatization created invisible walls between children and learning. So again, not allowed. Even those of us who are in school, we all have stories of trauma. Like when you thought they tell you you're ugly, you have some manini, and some would say, stop breathing. Otherwise our air would be taken, you would take all our air, and it would just freeze. And we just go. So I learned to swim, to hold my head under the water and swim, because I was used to, it was so easy for me to swim, because I was used to holding my air, just, and they say, boomba, forget the banga. So they would just send us away, they would say, anyway. So all kinds of things, just really trauma after trauma. And for sake of time, let's continue, please. Next slide. Thank you. I'm here using 35 testimonies that we've collected more than 200 testimonies right now. But I just, for this presentation, but I want to get into detail because many of you have heard of these stories over and over again. And the great one here we heard from Father Ernest. So I'm just not going to get into all the details of the stories. But we hear again and again, what keeps coming back is the pain, the loss, but the way they couldn't continue life the way it used to be. So I'm going to highlight one story that's also in one of the 35 testimonies. Next slide, please. Oh, by the way, these stories, if you want to have access to them, they are all free. As long as you have an internet, you can have access to them in our digital oral history archive that Colette is in charge of. They've been translated, transcribed, they've been digitized, right, editing and so on. They've been transcribed, translated, and now we have Echoes of Silence exhibit, which I'm hoping, Jean-Claude, I'm hoping you can help us really bring the Echoes of Silence exhibit here, because in Chicago, they fell in love with it. We've taken it to Armenia, outside the country. So we would love to bring it this. It's a traveling exhibit of portraits and the summary of the stories and maps of where all the stories are, where we've been, and so many things. It's audio, video, and images. So really one of the most successful projects we've had that's attached to the digital oral history archive. So we still Colette will share. We're still adding more stories to this project. Okay, all right. Then next. Okay, so so what the testimonies reveal? Oh, I'm sorry. Stay there, please. What's the, so of course you saw economic dispossession, social ostracism, suppressed grief. Many of us just hold it inside, kept moving without being able to mourn. Educational deprivation and the complex survival strategies, right? Navigating, knowing who killed your loved ones, knowing where they are buried, and you couldn't say a word. Just that is painful. Not for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. You know who killed your loved ones. You know where they are buried for many, and you couldn't say a thing. That's incredible. So for those of you who are still hearing people who deny it. Let me give you an example. So my father left with a guy who worked for him in one of the boutiques. So they go to Bujumbura to come replenish the stores. So my father doesn't come back, but this guy comes back. Well, guess what? He's Tutsi, okay? So he comes back, and not only he doesn't say anything about what happened to our father, but he changes locks on all the stores, all the boutiques, and starts doing business like nothing happened. So I used to walk into those stores to wait for my dad he can put me on his bike, we can go home. Now there's a neighbor, someone I know, who worked for him. I can't put my foot in there because it wasn't my father's anymore. So how did he know my father wasn't coming back? You see? So when people start denying, let's find these stories to ask them. Why did he change locks if he didn't know that my father wasn't coming back? Okay, next slide. Okay, merci. Okay, so now it's time to think about recognition, right? About justice, about healing and transformation. Last year I shared with you, those who were here, that it's been a roller coaster in my own healing journey, but I can tell you honestly, I have forgiven the people who killed my loved ones. Really, it's honest from the heart. But we still need justice. That can never be taken. Individually, we can choose to forgive, but the justice, collective public justice, needs to happen. We need space to mourn publicly, all of us. We need to have these widows, these orphans need to be heard publicly, collectively, nationally. We are owed that, absolutely. Accountability to the maximum. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, now as I conclude, I'm sorry it took longer than I thought. I'm just going to read this because I think rather than talking, I just read. So the 1972 genocide against Hutu in Burundi, and please everybody remember to add against Hutu, for the reason that many times when you say genocide in Burundi, they say, oh, they correct you and they say, you mean the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda? So we need this messaging to keep going. It's the genocide against Hutu in Burundi in 1972. So it was profoundly gendered in both its execution and its aftermath. The systematic elimination of Hutu male breadwinners left widows, mothers, and orphans navigating catastrophic loss in a climate of impunity, stigmatization, and enforced silence. Branded we were called Abas Vigihugu and Abamenja, stripped of property, forbidden from mourning, unable to keep their children in school. These women bore a second act of violence through the erasure of their suffering from memory and history. So the 35 testimonies, and we have many more, archived at Northeastern University Digital Commons, offer a rare window into this silenced world. They demand that we expand that gendered frame of genocide scholarship and that we recognize, document, and honor these voices before it is too late. And I honor you too for being here to continue to spread, to speak for those survivors. And if you're one of the survivors, I salute you. Keep telling your story. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.